From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefanía Bravo, and this is From the South. Today we begin with breaking news from Argentina, where a court has given prison sentences to 2 former Ford executives for their part in the dirty war conducted by the military dictatorship. Héctor Sibila, who was a Ford security manager, and 1 other executive were found guilty of handing over trade union activists who were then tortured by the military. Some of those trade unionists were in court for the verdict. The case has thrown light on the support given by multinational companies to Argentina's military dictatorship. Students continue to protest across France the day after President Emmanuel Macron announced concessions to the Yellow Vest movement. Hundreds of high school students have marched in Paris against the education reforms. These reforms include changes to the university admission system. Students are angry that their concerns are not being addressed.
The link that we can make with the Yellow Vests is the fact that there's despair in the society. I think on the part of the students, we are tired of not being listened to. There's no chance to be listened to. We're not being taken seriously. Our claims are not being taken seriously. And the interest in the Yellow Vests is that if we go under the same banner, the more we are, the easier it will be to make each other heard and bring forward each other's cause.
High school students have also protested in the south of the country. In the city of Montpellier, young people staged a performance to denounce the detention of dozens of fellow students. Hundreds of students have also rallied in Marseille. And Yellow Vest protests continue this Tuesday. The movement is still active despite President Macron's statement on Monday. They say the measures proposed by the French president are not enough.
The measures that Emmanuel Macron announced are from an economic world of the past, and the Yellow Vests want a new world, one that is closer to humanity.
Our correspondent in Paris, Sergio Rodrigo, tells us more.
Protests continue in France after President Emmanuel Macron gave a television speech on Monday night. More than 20 million people turned in for the 30-minute national address to offer an increase in the minimum wage and other reforms in an attempt to benefit the workers. But the Yellow Vest movement said this is not enough. This Tuesday, high school students gathered in different areas of Paris to protest, and several others around the country to show their support to the Yellow Vest protests. Other movements are also joining the marches to urge Emmanuel Macron and his government to step back from the education reform. Protests will continue, and blockades are also planned. There is an assembly scheduled here in Paris to decide how to continue with the protest. So far, trade unions have already called for more protests on December 14, as they are not satisfied with the proposal made by the government so far. Also on December 15, the Yellow Vests have called for the 5th demonstration event in the Champs-Élysées, where a massive attendance is expected.
The British Prime Minister Theresa May is touring European capitals in a desperate effort to win concessions and save her Brexit deal. May arrived in Berlin a day after she postponed a vote in the British Parliament because it was clear the deal would be rejected. There was an awkward moment when the car door got stuck and she couldn't get out to shake hands with the German Chancellor Angela Merkel. And earlier, May was in the Netherlands to meet the Prime Minister Mark Rutte. May wants reassurances over the so-called Irish backstop, a part of the agreement designed to prevent a hard border between the north and south of Ireland. Many of her own members of parliament fear this could trap the United Kingdom indefinitely under EU trade rules. However, a string of European diplomats say the deal cannot be renegotiated.
We are very much concerned about the postponement of the vote on the withdrawal agreement. We've done a lot to help the UK. This withdrawal agreement is the only possible agreement, and we've done a lot of concessions to reach it. So we sincerely hope that there can be a majority to ratify the withdrawal agreement, but we have to stand ready for a no deal, and we are preparing for it.
The last 24 hours, what to say about Brexit, that is that we have spiraled again into a new mess. The vote is delayed, Mrs. May is coming back to Brussels again, and I think that with this Parliament we have 2 messages for her. The first is, whatever the request may be, we will never let down our Irish friends. It's out of question to renegotiate the backstop on Ireland. And secondly, if she is looking in the political declaration for a closer relationship with the European Union, as Manfred Weber has said, to avoid the use of this backstop, there will be no obstacle. There will be no problem to do so.
There is no room whatsoever for renegotiation. But, of course, there is room, if used intelligently, is room enough to give further clarifications and further interpretations without opening the withdrawal agreement. This will not happen. Everyone has to know that the withdrawal agreement will not be reopened.
The British government has announced that its Brexit deal will be brought back for a vote in Parliament by the 21st of January. However, some opposition members, including the Scottish Nationalist Party, are pushing for an immediate vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister. The Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, says he will call for such a vote at the right time.
This is no longer a functioning government, and the Prime Minister must admit her deal is dead. Her shambolic negotiations have ended in failure, and she no longer has the authority to negotiate for this country when she doesn't even have the authority of her own party. I've tabled this motion today, which the members supported the tabling of. We have no confidence in this government. We need to do the appropriate thing at the appropriate time to have a motion of no confidence in order to get rid of this government.
The United Nations Migration Conference in Morocco is on its second day, with members discussing the details of the Migration Pact signed on Monday. Representatives and UN officials from over 160 countries are attending a plenary meeting to discuss the realities and the opportunities of the pact. In a landmark agreement, the members signed an agreement on safe, orderly and regular migration, despite objection from the United States and a few other countries. This pact is seen as the first international document on managing migration. It lays out 23 objectives to open up legal migration and discourage illegal border crossings. The conference in Marrakech will launch a process of intergovernmental negotiations leading to the adoption compact. According to the UN, the number of people on the move globally surged to more than 250 million, and now countries have bigger responsibilities with them. Brazil's future foreign minister announced that the country will leave the Migration Pact. In a tweet, he said, the government of Jair Bolsonaro will leave the Global Pact for Migration, an inadequate instrument to cope with the problem. He said immigration shouldn't be treated as a global issue, but as an accord between the reality and sovereignty of each country. Chile's foreign ministry has said that the agreement is not in line with its internal policies after refusing to sign the pact.
The text discussed at the United Nations clashes with Chile's norms to have a safe, orderly and regular migration. We want to be clear with this. There is a contradiction with our orderly migratory policy, which is regulated and responsible, fundamentally because it doesn't establish with total clarity the distinction between a regular migrant who arrives in our country, instead respecting scrupulously the laws that we have given, and an irregular migrant.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us.
Acompañamos a los pueblos que resisten en cada una de sus luchas.
Somos esa ventana que se abre para visibilizarlos entre fronteras.
Thursdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Pro-immigration groups have protested at the border between Mexico and the United States. The activists gathered in a California beach near the fence separating both countries to protest the immigration policies pushed by President Donald Trump. And at the U.S. side of the border, dozens of leaders from different faiths were arrested over the weekend as they gathered there to show their support for migrants. The group said they brought together some 200 faith and indigenous leaders who represented diverse faiths, including Christian, Jewish, and Muslim. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump says he will use the army to build the remainings of the wall if the Democrats do not support the budgetary funds to ensure border security. In a series of tweets, Trump praises the job made by security forces and said many migrants are returning to their homelands as they won't be able to cross. Our correspondent Pablo Perez brings us the latest from the border.
We're at a place called Otay Mesa. This is near Tijuana on the Mexican state of Baja California, bordering the southern state of California of the United States. And to this point is where the some representatives of the migrant caravan are headed. In a few minutes they will arrive because there behind me there's the United States General Consulate. And the migrants, the Central Americans, are going to deliver a letter to the North American consul here, and they are attempting to ease their process for the ones that are asking for refugee or political asylum in the United States. That's something that has been very difficult lately because of the policies of the Donald Trump government that has lowered the number of applicants up to 30 a day when they usually were processing 100 or even more daily. Now they're only processing 30, and that's insufficient because there's not only the migrants, the Central American migrants, but there's also a lot of people applying for the refugee status here in Tijuana, people coming from all over the world. There are Russians, there are Africans, people from India that are trying to get into the United States through this entry port. So the migrants some of them are trying to do this in the legal way, but there's another way that is crossing to the United States and getting detained by the Border Patrol and then asking them, after turning themselves over, asking them to the authorities for the initiation of their refugee application. The CBP, the California Border Patrol, has said that over the last weeks they have detained over 2,000 Central Americans. That's a rise on the number of the people that is crossing illegally through the desert, walking through the desert, or aided by what they call coyotes. That's the people that charge for crossing the border illegally. And that surge on illegal crossing has been registered not only here in the border between Baja California and California, but all over the border between Mexico and the United States. That's indicating, according to certain analysts, that the migration itself is growing, and not only because it's not only shown on the migrant caravan, but on a surge all over the border.
We thank Pablo Perez for that report. And moving on, 2 Russian military planes have landed in Venezuela for Air Force training exercises aimed at strengthening its defense capacities. The move comes after a series of meetings in Moscow between President Nicolás Maduro and Russian President Vladimir Putin to build strong bilateral relations. Welcoming around 100 Russian pilots and other personnel, Venezuelan Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez said Venezuela can defend itself when necessary, but added that the country is a maker of peace, not war.
These flight exchanges, which we are going to begin with the Operational Strategic Command of the Army, aim to raise the level of interoperability of the Russian and Venezuelan air defense systems.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has said that the exercises represent a squandering of public funds and squelching of liberty and freedom while their people suffer. And the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has responded at Pompeo's statements, particularly on the waste of funds comment. Peskov said, quote, "We do not agree with the statement. Moreover, it is also inappropriate to make such comments from a country where half of the defense budget can feed the whole of Africa." And the brother of the president of Honduras is facing a trial this Tuesday under allegations of drug trafficking. Juan Antonio, brother of Juan Orlando Hernandez, is accused of smuggling drug from Colombia and Mexico into the United States in 2004. His attorney says he will pledge not guilty in a court in New York. The former congressman was arrested on November 23rd. A federal judge in Argentina has summoned the father and brother of President Mauricio Macri over a corruption case. Franco and Gianfranco Macri are to testify on Thursday in a Buenos Aires court. They were accused of paying bribes by their construction company, Socma, to secure construction contracts. The alleged bribery took place between 2003 and 2007. Brazilian police have raided properties of the senator and former presidential candidate Aécio Neves after corruption accusations. Neves is suspected of money laundering and bribe-taking. He was a presidential candidate in 2014 and was defeated by Dilma Rousseff in the second round. Neves was among the senators who backed the impeachment of Rousseff. And as the world marked the 70th anniversary of the UN Declaration on Human Rights, Free Lula events around Brazil called for the former president's freedom. Our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Brian Muir, brings us more.
Last night, on December 10th, in honor of the 70th anniversary of the UN Declaration on Human Rights, a series of events were held across Brazil demanding freedom for ex-President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who was arrested last April with no material evidence by a judge, Sergio Moro, who's now accepted a cabinet position in the far-right government of Jair Bolsonaro. During an event in the ABC Metallurgical Union headquarters in São Bernardo do Campo in São Paulo, guests from left political parties from across Latin America and Europe gave speeches talking about human rights and demanding freedom for the ex-president. And at the end of this event, they read a letter by Lula that he wrote from behind bars for the crowd. In this letter, Lula said that he refuses to exchange his dignity for freedom. And he finished the letter saying that he knows that although there are many setbacks going on in Brazil and across the world in terms of human rights, he knows that the cause of human rights is going to continue to march forward. And he called on all people who care about human rights to fight for democracy. In Sao Paulo, this is Brian Muir reporting for Telesur.
We thank Brian for that report. And in Colombia, victims of the armed conflict have celebrated the International Human Rights Day with an art exhibition. The group of victims created different pieces of clothing with colorful fabrics to narrate their experiences during the armed conflict. They are now demanding truth and justice and that there is never another armed conflict. The names of more than 200 murdered social leaders were also featured on the clothing.
On this canvas, we're making a public denunciation, a way to narrate our story, restoring our social memory through art.
The Parliament of St. Vincent and the Grenadines has debated the decriminalization of medical cannabis. Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves supported a proposed legislation.
So that the second part of the question, if I have any plans to bring the legislation here to Parliament, no, this is a matter which will work through the framework of CARICOM. And hopefully we have a big discussion on this. And some of my supporters may not agree with me in the position that I have taken and even to raise it. At the same time, a lot of NDP supporters will say, Comrade Ralph is quite correct to raise this matter about the medicinal properties of marijuana. And we must not stick our head in the sand and criminalize young people unnecessarily.
Representatives of different social sectors in Brazil have recognized the work made by Cubans as they were saying goodbye to more than 200 doctors at Brasilia International Airport. More in this report.
The Brazilian people highlighted the human and quality attention of Cuban doctors during the farewell to more than 200 professionals at the international airport President Juscelino Kubitschek in Brasilia.
People have learned what is to receive attention from a doctor, what is social medicine, and they are going to claim it now. I am positive that the seed the Cuban doctors sowed in Brazil is going to flourish, is going to be reborn.
We are here to say goodbye to Cuban doctors and to apologize to them because they have to leave. The Brazilian people are very grateful for all they did, and we hope they return here.
Representatives of different social sectors in the Brazilian capital recognized the work of the collaborators of the island in poor, isolated communities and indigenous districts, places where Brazilian doctors are yet to arrive.
It is very sad to see the doctors return to Cuba because they were here providing a great service that many Brazilian doctors did not want. I want to say that more than 60 million Brazilian people are sad and now without a doctor.
I am here to say goodbye to the Cuban doctors because they gave a lot of love to the Brazilians and they deserve our eternal recognition.
December 14 is the deadline for Brazilian doctors to replace Cubans in health centers. Otherwise, more than 2,824 municipalities will lose their health professionals.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us.
Telesur brings you special interviews with social and political personalities. Monday, from Washington. Tuesday, from Mexico. Wednesday, from Caracas. Thursday, from Quito. Friday, from Havana. Analysis about our continent's reality. Weekdays, only on Telesur. An occasion to enjoy the cultural diversity that defines our South American essence. Come along to find out the story behind these personalities, traditions, and artistic expressions that unite us as a whole. Real Lives. Friday, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Yemen's Houthi movement and the Saudi-backed government have exchanged a list of 15,000 prisoners for a swap as a confidence-building measure. Both parties took the step at the United Nations-sponsored peace talks taking place in Sweden. They still have to settle main disputes between them, including a ceasefire in the port of Hodeidah and reopening of Sana'a airport. Western allies have been pressing both sides to end a war that has pushed Yemen at the verge of famine.
Between us and the other party, with Sheikh Hadi Hamed Haig, this is considered the second step in the agreement that was signed on December 2nd. And God willing, in 2 weeks, there will be remarks on the lists exchanged. And God willing, within 45 days or less, there will be a complete exchange.
At least 4 people have been killed and others 6 injured in a suicide bomb attack in Afghanistan. The suicide bomber targeted a military convoy outside the Afghan capital, Kabul. The blast occurred when the convoy was coming back from overnight operations. The Taliban has claimed responsibility for the attack. Church bells that were seized from the Philippines by the U.S. troops as war trophies have been returned. The 3 bells will be back to the church in the central town of Balangiga. The Philippines hails them as a symbol of its struggle for independence. They were looted by U.S. soldiers during an attack that killed 48 Filipinos in 1901. Historical Babur Gardens in the capital of Afghanistan have lit it up against gender violence. Orange colors has also covered the Queen's Palace as part of a campaign to raise awareness on violence against women and girls. The 16 days campaign has run from the Day for the Elimination of Gender Violence to the International Human Rights Day. The Babur Gardens are a centenary place where the first Mughal emperor is buried. And we end with some breaking news from Ecuador. Otto Sonnenhosner has been chosen as the country's new vice president. The National Assembly chose him with 94 votes in favor out of 128 assembly members. There were 27 against and 7 abstentions. Sonnenhosner is a well-known radio presenter from Guayaquil. He has no formal links to any political parties. However, several figures from Ecuador's traditional right-wing parties have expressed support for him. And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And for our viewers in Africa, remember you can find us on StarSat, channel 461 in South Africa, and channel 539 in Nigeria. Also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.